Yeah. Can you dig it? Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Jake Johnson, and you're watching Untethered Live, the chill stream, baby. It's Friday night, and nobody needs your rocking chair. What a wonderful day it's been. Lovely, warm, almost like it's summertime. Can't complain. Got my air conditioner on right now in the middle of December. That should tell you something. Global warming. Or not, or maybe it's just warm today. Hey. Good to see everybody. Welcome to the show. We got some stuff in store tonight. Gonna do a little rebuttal, see what happens. I got a video that I'm not too sure about. We'll find out what it contains and whether there's any wisdom abroad. How is everyone? I'm sure there's somebody here. Let me see. Oh, Lord, there's somebody here. I thought I was all by myself, and there you are watching me. Well, welcome to the show, and if you feel like chatting. If you don't. I'm going to talk my butt off all hour long. That's what I get paid to do, though, so I'll do it. I got a nice shave. Feel good. I looked like a hobo 10 minutes ago, so we're good. My son told me yesterday, he said, I don't mean to be mean, but you're getting kind of the white look. I said, what do you mean? He said, all your hair's turned white. I said, yeah, that's from worrying about you. This one here came right from worrying about you. That's what all this gray is. And I earned every bit of it. I'm not coloring it. I'll cut it off, but I'm not coloring it. Come on, man. I deserve that gray. And that's for everybody. I'm sure everybody's been through similar things. My mama used to say that to me, and I didn't believe her till I got there. Now I believe her. It's amazing. It's the cycle of life. Plan to go hang out with some buddies of mine this weekend and pick a little guitar. Still can't sing, but I can play. But it is getting better, though. My voice is getting stronger, so I don't know if it's going to heal or not, but it's acting like it wants to, so that's a good thing. And Christmas, right around the corner, next week. What, Friday? Saturday? Something like that? Amazing. Seems like it was just Christmas last year, and now it's Christmas this year. Time is just flying by. Of course, it's always easy to fly by when you're having fun, right? You never know. We might do something crazy this year, like re-elect a president next year. That'd be nice. Kind of miss the old orange dude. Well, prices of gas are higher than they've ever been before. There's less work than there's ever been before. People are rioting in the streets and burning buildings down, and people are getting shot in schools left and right, and all the policies are up in the air and in and out of Afghanistan, and Jesus Christ, there's all kind of crazy shit going on, but nobody's tweeting mean tweets. We got him. Nobody has to feel bad about something somebody said on a platform that isn't real. It's time you get your priorities in order, America. Find out what's valuable, what's important. And what is that? Stuff happening. We used to live in the freest, most powerful country in the world, and now, we live in China. Remember that show Firefly? Turns out they were right. Pretty soon we're going to be speaking half Chinese, half English words. Better brush up on your Mandarin. That's all I can tell you. How now? I don't know Mandarin. That sounded vaguely Mandarin, though. And have you had your flu shot yet? I mean, the other shot. Don't get it. Here's my problem. The more they push it, the more I think there's something else going on besides it. Like if they'd have never said anything, if they'd have just offered it, I'd have been first in line to get it. But then they told me I had to get it, and I'm like, my mama don't tell me what I have to do. What makes you think you're going to tell me? And then they kept telling me I had to do it, and then they threatened me if I didn't do it, they were going to start taking rights away. And I'm like, I'm not getting it. I don't know what's in it. Not happening. And I'm sure that 90% of America feels the same way. When you try too hard, it tends to make people suspicious. And they're trying way too hard. And I can just about guarantee you that 10 years from now, we're going to hear something about it. And it'll be like, oh, that's what they were doing. I don't know what that thing is. I mean, it could be anything, but it's something, I promise. The government doesn't act unless it's acting in its own interest, and it certainly doesn't get involved unless it can control the situation. So take that for what you will. How is everybody? Is there anybody here yet? I'm just enjoying this cigarette and waiting for some folks to show up so we can get down to business. It's going to be a laid-back podcast tonight. Nothing big, no groundbreaking stuff, I don't think. Maybe. Could be. Might surprise me. Who knows? Basically going to listen to somebody else talk for a little while. And then say what I think about it. I watched the Director's Edition Blu-ray of Star Trek The Motion Picture last night. That was fun. Hey, Diego, there you is. Jake is perfect. Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate the compliment. Dog whistle, dog whistle. White supremacy. Or maybe it's just somebody going, okay. Waiting for everybody. That's what I'm doing. Just waiting to see if anybody's going to show up. You showed up, so that's good. Anyway, as I was saying, I got to watch the restored, remastered, re-including of all the deleted scenes version of Star Trek The Motion Picture last night. It was a nice blast from the past. A little warm up to the old days. I missed that movie. It's a pretty good show. Can't wait for you to destroy those sons of Satan. Well, I don't know how much of destroying I'm going to do. I've previewed some of it, and it looks to me like it's somebody else's podcast, and we need to stay away from those things. I'm going to do it for tonight. But pretty much the other guy is doing my job. So we need to stick to like debates or keynote speakers, people that go out and make videos about things, but not somebody else's video about somebody. We got to get away from that. It's probably going to end up giving me a strike, but we'll see. I'll try to get away with it. Anyway, I'm going to go through the video and see what he says and see if there's any wisdom I can glean from it. But for the most part, it's pretty much the guy talking about a book he wrote. That's not going to help us out very much. We'll see. Maybe he'll say some stuff that's in the book. I would much rather have him talking about the subject matter of the book on his own video, and that way I could debate his ideas rather than his answers to somebody else's questions about his ideas. If that makes any sense. But we'll see what happens. I should have previewed it a lot sooner than I did, but I didn't have much time and I rushed into it. But it's too late now. We're moving. That's how the TV business works. You get on a thing and you just go until it's done. Who is calling me at 8:30? We'll see. I'll have to call them back. Sorry about that. Oh, it's Mac Avant, a guy who should know better. Anyway, how are things, Diego? What are you doing today? Hey, Caucasian. Good to see you, buddy. I have been pretty much sitting by the phone all day today, waiting. My boss had a graduation or something to go to, so I didn't work today. Been waiting on him to get home to call me to come to work, and it never came to being. So I've been just sitting waiting all day. Don't like to do that. A. B, your turn. So I don't know if you guys are Star Trek fans or whatever, but if you get a chance to watch that Blu-ray remastered edition, director's edition of Star Trek: The Motion Picture, it's a completely different movie than the theatrical release because they added in some stuff they had to take out for time, and it changes the nature of the show, and it's actually a pretty good movie. Yeah, only one person speaking. That's what I need. Like like a keynote speaker or somebody that's putting out a video about their ideas. I can't really do anything with somebody else's podcast, and that's what this is. It's him talking to another guy who's interviewing him about a book he wrote. So I don't know how much we're going to get out of this. I'm going to go through it and see, and maybe he'll say some good stuff, but I don't know. We need to stick closer to the one guy talking so that I can rebut his ideas. So next time you recommend a guy, just make sure you keep that in mind. That'll help out a lot. That'll give me fodder to work with and all that good stuff. You got family coming from North Carolina for Christmas? Sweet. What kind of family you got in North Carolina, and what part of North Carolina? I'm in the east part. I'm in the easternmost part of western North Carolina. I'm in the westernmost part of eastern North Carolina. Your dad loves Star Trek? Ask him about the motion picture. Maybe you should give it a chance. There's a reason he loves it. It's because it's good stuff. It's wholesome. I mean, it's not like movies today. But at the same time, it's got good messaging. It's a good action-packed movie. It's got a lot of excitement and drama and things and movement. It's a really good movie. Anyway, I don't know if you guys are into it, but I appreciated it. I'm a fan. So that director's edition is what I was talking about. Is that the original movie? They cut a lot of it out for time, and it ended up being a little disjointed and felt a little slow, and it wasn't the best movie ever made. But when they added all the stuff back into it and then remastered it and added in new special effects and things with modern technology, it actually made it a better movie. And it's actually a pretty good movie. I think you'll enjoy it. Yeah, I watched it when I was a kid too. It used to be on TV every day on just about every channel at some place or another. For a long time, you couldn't watch any channel without seeing Star Trek somewhere. It was in heavy syndication rotation. I missed those days because that was a good show. But that was also back in the day where you watched an episode of something and then thought about it for a few months. And so if you watched it again, it would just be like revisiting that thought. And they don't do it like that anymore. Now they just put out like 10 episodes and that's the whole thing. You watch it in one go and you're done. back then, a season would be like 25, 26 episodes, not 10. And then they would rerun those 25 episodes all year long, you know. And then once a year, they would have what they called a marathon, where they'd play the whole series every season back to back, one right after another. And I used to try to stay up and watch the whole thing. I never did make it through a whole marathon. You're talking 99 episodes of a show. That's hard to stay awake through. But I miss those days. I miss everything about the old days. It's just a better world we lived in. A lot less perceived hatred. I'm sure it was still there, but it was buried deep under the surface. It wasn't everyday life, you know. You felt much more comfortable in the world. That guy that called me a minute ago was my buddy Mac, who's in the nursing home for having the open wound that turned septic, and he nearly died. He's much, much better now. He's up on his feet. Well, metaphorically, he's in a wheelchair. He's not on his feet, but he's healthier. He's all there. When you look in his eyes, it don't look like he's off in the la-la land somewhere. He's coherent. He's talking. He's visiting. Very good to see. That was him that just called me. Probably something important. I'll have to call him back right after the podcast. But it's very good to see him up and moving again. Your favorite character was Data, so you're a Next Generation guy. See, I'm a original series guy. I like Shatner. I'm that era. But I like Next Generation too. It just isn't my favorite. Yep, old Brent Spiner. But I grew up a little bit before you did. Imagine if Christopher Walken played Data. I can't imagine that. That would be weird. Captain, you're using the wrong tone. I'll stab you in the face with a soldering iron. Terrible Christopher Walken impersonation. He could have used a little more cowbell. That's right. That's referring, of course, to the old famous Saturday Night Live skit with him and Will Ferrell. Interesting. That was back when Saturday Night Live was actually funny to some degree. It hadn't been funny in a while. The last time I watched it in dismay and awe. Like, why are they still doing this? They hadn't been funny in 10 years. More cowbell. Yep, old Christopher Walken. He's made some good movies. Trying to think of one movie he was in that was really good. I want to say it was The Prophecy or The Prophet. I think it was A Prophecy about him being an angel. It's a pretty good movie. Hey, Alpine Gulch, how are you doing this fine evening? Welcome to the show. Come on in, take your shoes off, set a spell. We were just talking about movies from the old days. Boondock Saints. Good movie. Lightning in a bottle, though. They couldn't remake that movie if they wanted to. was can't think of the guy's name. He plays in The Walking Dead now. No, Norman Reedus. Norman Reedus and Willem Dafoe was the titular bad guy or good guy or however you want to see him. Boondock Saints has the best joke ever. Really? Was it 2 Jews walked into a bar, the other one ducked? I'm not sure. I can't remember if Christopher Walken was in Boondock Saints or not. I don't think he was, but he might have been. I think that was Willem Dafoe that was in that movie. But Walken might have been in it also. It's been a long time since I've seen it. He was in that movie, True Romance. Christopher Walken was. That was a good movie, too. That was written by Quentin Tarantino, but not directed by him. Such a lovely day it is. It's quite peaky. Right, Willem Dafoe. I think that's who you're thinking of. He played a cross-dressing copper with an attitude. I can't remember if he was a bad guy or not, though. It seems like he might have been. But I barely remember anything about that movie as far as the plot goes. I just remember the two characters. I like Quentin Tarantino-esque movies like that, though. What's sticky and brown? I'm going to go with brown sugar. Or honey. Or an African in a brothel. But don't keep us in suspense. What's sticky and brown? Black tar heroin. That's black. Dum 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 dum. A stick in the mud. What's black, white, and red all over? Penguin in a blender. A newspaper. A priest at a pre-release trial. Come on, can I get an amen? Pandas with a sunburn, yes. You guys are so nice, it makes my teeth hurt. Well, where's April and Kev tonight? That's weird that they're not here. Surely they'll be along in a minute. You lost connection after mud. That's not good. All right. We are going to take a gander at somebody else's podcast tonight and listen to them interview a guy about a book he wrote that's concerning the Gospels and his belief, or rather disbelief, in those Gospels, and see if he says anything that I can rebut or defend. It might be interesting. It might be boring, but it will be real must-see TV. Is it a New York accent or a Long Island accent? I don't know. Okay, let's get real. I'm going to switch to a black background. Uh-huh. This is, of course, forget I said anything. Oh, Dr. M. David Litwa. Dr. M. David Litwa has written a book called How the Gospels Became History. And we are going to decide whether or not he has any commonality or sense, for that matter. Here we go.
How are you, my friend?
Good, Derek. Good to be here. Good to see you.
Well, I'm glad you're joining me. I'm super excited to get into the information.
And this is Derek from Myth Vision, by the way.
That you have gold mined for quite some time. And some of the books that you've written, I know for a fact, I haven't read them yet, all of them, but I know for a fact I'm going to love them. And I want everyone who's checking this out to get the opportunity to be on the same page. And they're all on Amazon. Some of them, are easily affordable. Others a little more hefty on the cost, How the Gospels Became History. That's the one we're going to be talking about today in this particular episode for anyone who's interested. And then, of course, you can go and follow him on Amazon. He has a blog. Go down in the description of this video. You guys can check it out. This book also, we're going to be discussing the evil creator as time goes by. You're going to want to check that out. How early Christians viewed this God and what happened here. So let's go ahead and jump deep into the water here.
I'm beginning to think that this guy might have a chip on his shoulder about the old man.
We've never had you on the episode here on Myth Vision at all. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into how the Gospels became history?
Sure. Well, I graduated from the University of Virginia in 2013 I did my work in classics and religious studies. And then I moved briefly to the College of William and Mary and Virginia Tech. I sort of did the Virginia tour.
Something that's always struck me as odd is how people will rely on their studies as a statement of intent. Like, I did my studies at so-and-so. You realize that just because you studied something don't mean you passed it or learned anything. I find that a lot of people that go into quote unquote religious studies come out as atheists, which means they're not paying close attention to what they're studying. Not sure I would listen to those people.
And then, of all places, I ended up in Australia, and I'm here at a place called the Institute for Religion and Critical Inquiry, which is a research institute.
Which is a contradiction in terms. A religion and an institute are two different things.
In which basically I'm charged to write, and I basically that's what most of my time now is for, just pure research, which has been great. I hope to get back to the States at some point, but I'm really enjoying my Australian tour.
I bet you are now.
That's.
I wonder, are you in one of those little camps? You know, one of those getaways for the COVIDly inclined?
That's me.
Well, I'm glad to make your acquaintance, and I'm really happy to have you on the show. You know, we've had tons of scholars, and I keep adding to that list of other scholars who have different ideas and why they might take certain conclusions. Next month, I'll be seeing Dale C. Allison Jr., and I'm going up to Princeton. I'll be seeing him, and of course,
good.
He has certain conclusions and draws certain ideas and would probably differ in many ways than your conclusions do off your books. So I guess we'll get right in here, and I might as well ask the question, how in the world can we be so confused over the Gospels? I mean, Christians, especially ones like that came from the flavor that I did, this is literally God's word, every single jot and tittle. You know, it's literal history. Everything
that is correct
listed in them really happened. How do we go from what you describe in the opening introduction of this book, How the Gospels Became History, to every single thing's literally true, where we have people grabbing snakes in...
The Bible never tells you to grab snakes. That is a man's idea, not God's idea. Why are you using that as a rebuttal against the Gospels? No gospel tells you to grab snakes. There is a difference between, hey, grab that snake and show it who's boss, and if you have faith, you can tread on serpents. Big difference. Do you understand the meaning? First of all, it's metaphoric. Second of all, it's talking about faith, not action. The snake has not read the Bible. It does not know it's not supposed to bite you. A moron would pick up a snake.
Church, thinking this is actually what they need to be doing, the ending of Mark, so to speak, or Paul.
And how did we get there? Probably because we went from learning about something to hearing about something to making opinions about something, and to people like you with no formal education about said gospels doing podcasts about said gospels. That's the problem, not the gospels. Oh, Untethered, I need some prayers. I'm in the hospital in San Francisco. I'm sure I'll be okay, but prayers are always needed. Well, 420, what happened to you, buddy? How'd you end up in the hospital? And of course you have our prayers. Father, please watch over 420. Keep your hands on him. Keep him safe and pull him through whatever he's going through. And with your will, he come out unscathed on the other side. Thank you, Father, for your attention in this matter. In Jesus' precious name, amen. Hope that helps, buddy. Hey, Dees, good to see you. Welcome to the show. Is this a Q&A? It can be. This is us reviewing a podcast, but you are more than welcome to ask a question, and I will endeavor to answer it. Welcome to the show. If you haven't pressed that subscribe button, please do so.
On the island gets bit by a serpent and he survives. It's like, what the heck happened? Why are we not seeing these things as a combination of both myth and history, or historiography and mythography, if you will?
Well, your first mistake is assuming that it's myth when everything that can be checked in the Bible is in fact correct. If it says that there's an oasis in the desert with 8 trees, you can go to that place and count the trees. It's there. There are things in the Bible you can't check, such as the existence of God or whatever, but everything that you can check is correct. So why then would you assume that the things you can't check are incorrect? That seems like bad thinking to me. What religion do you go by? This is Untethered Live. I am untethered from religion. We do not have a denomination here. We read the Bible and try to understand the meaning of the words therein, and that is it. No denomination. Hope that helps.
Well, those are
Do we have to keep the commandments? They're commandments. So yes.
big questions, Derek. Maybe the best way to start is just I actually have 2 books on Jesus. One was my dissertation. It was
Seidel, you're out of here.
published as Jesus Deus, the early Christian depiction of Jesus as a Mediterranean God. And I guess
Jesus was not a Mediterranean God. He was a Jewish man. He lived as a man. He died as a man. He did do a few supernatural things, but he did it to prove a point. His entire life was lived as a man in Judea, not the Mediterranean. You are starting off on the wrong foot, sir.
I can tell you how my thought evolved as a sort of introduction to the myth stuff. My purpose for the Jesus Deus book was to look at what I called the literary deification of Jesus. That is, to look at how early Christians deified Jesus.
Early Christians did not. I repeat, the early Christians did not deify Jesus. Jesus deified Jesus. When he said, I am, he said, before Abraham was, I am. That is not a grammatical error. That is him making a specific statement to a specific people who understood what he was saying. I am that I am is what God, or rather Gabriel the angel speaking for God, said to Moses in the burning bush when he said, who should I say sent me? And the bush said, tell them I am that I am, which is a Hebrewism for the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, God Almighty. That's who Jesus claimed to be. He claimed it quite a few times. Early Christians had nothing to do with the deification of Christ. You are incorrect, sir.
In their narrative descriptions of him, that is how they portrayed him.
No, smoking is not a sin. And yes, I am smoking. Smoking is bad for your health. I'm not going to go to hell for smoking. And I'm also grown and know the difference. So it's my choice to smoke. There's nothing in the Bible that says I can't smoke. In fact, there were spittoons in the tabernacle of God, which meant tobacco use was a regular occurrence in those days.
As a Greco-Roman deity. And I was really interested in, why anyone would have thought this Jewish man, apparently from Nazareth, would be viewed as a god. It's not entirely incredible that people would deify someone in the ancient world. In fact, I mean, it's not totally incredible even in our world. It seems to be happening in North Korea with some of their dictators there.
No, sir. There is a big difference between a man demanding that you treat him as a god or he will starve your family and put you in a prison. There's a big difference between that and Christians looking to a God who proves himself to be God. Big difference. Why are you conflating the two? It is not the same thing.
So it's not a completely foreign idea, but I wanted to understand how early Christians did it in their literature and whether there were commonalities with other classical authors in how they depicted figures as divine in their literature. So I'm not actually, in that book, I wasn't actually interested in the question of was Jesus a god, that as a kind of theological question.
Yes,
but
he was.
How did early Christians come to think of him that way?
Because he said that's who he was.
Depict him in that way. As my thought kind of evolved, basically 5 years later, I published How the Gospels Became History with Yale, and this is a more philosophical book, I guess. It's interested more in the question of how do we gain access to truth and what verifies religious truth. Something that I noticed.
You should probably read the entire book of Corinthians, and you'll find out there are several things mentioned in that book, namely to the people of the tribe of Judea for the express purposes of working in the temple or the tabernacle. It is not for everyone. Those are not part of the 10 Commandments. Those are for a people that were set aside by God to be a peculiar people, and they were given many rules that they couldn't mix fabrics together. They had to follow certain guidelines. They had to wash a certain way. They had to pray a certain way. That's not for everybody. That's for those people. We've been through that. You can go back and watch my previous podcast about Corinthians. We went through that book and the books previous to it, and I explained those things in detail. There are 10 commandments. They are very simple, common sense rules that everyone on earth should follow, because if you do them, they screw your life up. And also, you'll go to hell for them. The main one is the first and the fourth one. I think it's the fourth one. I might be wrong about that. But I am the Lord thy God. There shall be no other gods before me. That is commandment 1. The next main commandment is to treat your neighbor as your brother. Love your neighbor. Love your brother as yourself. Those things are very important. If you truly do those two things, you will not commit any of the other commandments broken. Now, is smoking a sin? No, it's not. It's probably not wise. It'll probably cause me to have some sort of heart disease or lung cancer or something to that effect. But it will not damage my soul, and it will not prevent me from going to heaven. It's not a sin. And your body is a temple, but that's a spiritual thing, not a physical thing, which means physical things affecting it will not hurt it. I.e., you could tattoo the letters or numbers 666 from head to toe on your body. That will not prevent you from going to heaven. What matters is what's in your soul. And what about the laws in Leviticus? Same thing. That's for the Jews. That is not for the heathens. There is a clear difference between the teaching of the two.
And
unless I'm Jewish, which I'm not, that doesn't apply to me.
Both Australia and in the U.S., is that we all kind of...
No, the 10 Commandments are for everyone. These laws and precepts and edicts that are in the books of the law, i.e. Leviticus, Deuteronomy, Corinthians, all of those books, Kings, everywhere they talk about those laws, those are not part of the 10 Commandments. That's a different set of rules for a different set of people. And you're not part of those people. That is for the tribe of Judah of the 12 tribes of Israel, because they were set aside by God to be peculiar and to be different than everybody else. And they should follow those laws, but everyone else shouldn't. If that helps. I know it's a little complicated and it might sound like back talking, but it's not. There are 10 commandments that everyone is applied to. 10 rules you have to live your life by. All those other laws are for a specific group of people.
Are socialized into conflating history and truth. We think that if something happened, then it must be true. And this is like a very kind of like...
If something happened, then it is true.
A primitive philosophical theory. Like, if X happened in the past, then it's true. And you'll see this used in apologetical arguments that, well, the reason because Christianity is true is because Jesus really did X, Y, and Z. He was a real man, and so on and so forth. And therefore, this shores, so the historical, so-called historical truth, shores up the religious truth. And because Jesus is on the History Channel, he's better than, say, Buddha or Zoroaster or
I'm going to assume that you know how stupid that statement was, and I'm not even going to call you on it because it was retarded. Now, Jesus was a man. He did live. There is historical evidence of it. It is the truth. He did make certain claims. He did back those claims up by certain actions, and the people that witnessed it did believe him. That being said, that is not the same thing as a religion. A religion is one man or one group's opinion or uh, uh, perception of the truth. Islam is a perception of Judaism. It's not entirely the right thing, but it's that man, Ishmael, it's his idea of what Judaism is, and he put it in that direction. Whereas Judaism is a different version of reality. Catholicism is a sliver of the truth. Buddhism is a sliver of the truth. Hinduism is a sliver of the truth. The truth is much bigger than all religions. You got Pentecostal holiness and Baptist and on and on and on and on. They're just certain ways of perceiving inspired truth. But the truth is still there, whether you have an opinion on it or not. And what I teach is an untethered version of the truth, which means it comes from the words, nothing else. My opinions hardly enter into it. And when I do give an opinion, I make clear that it is an opinion. It is not fact. Fact is what's written in the book. Opinion is what I perceive what's written in the book to say.
And I always found this.
I like the truth too, Dees, and I hope that you'll stick around and join us while we endeavor to learn what that is. How do I feel about Revelations 2:9? Well, we've already been through Revelations. If you'll go back and watch my Revelation podcast, you'll see exactly how I felt about it. By the way, I am going through the Bible 3 times. The milk, the meat, and the honey. Right now we're in the milk phase. We're just getting the basics down. We're just going through it to find out what it says. The next time through, we'll delve deeper and get into the esoteric meanings of things and understand about the figures of speech and folklore and Hebrewisms and traditions of men at that era and time and things like that. And we'll get into the deeper meanings of why things happened the way they did. And the third time around, we'll go all the way into the rabbit hole, into numerology, into Bible codes, into the different ways that things are connected across thousands of years and how those things were prophesied. And we'll get into the real deep stuff on the third go around. That's the only way to teach the Word of God. Book, chapter, verse, explanation, understanding. That is all we're doing here.
I always find this a very interesting characteristic of Western presuppositions. You know, in this Australian context, just to give you a kind of...
Oh, by the way, Dees, this is a Friday night show, which means Wednesdays and Fridays we usually just hang out and talk about whatever. And in this particular day, we're going through this video, so to speak. It's not a very exciting video, so I'm kind of branching off. But on Sundays and Mondays, we do Bible study where we read the Bible and talk about it. And so I hope you'll join us for one of those days. Sunday at 8, every other day, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 8:30.
Example of how people don't think this way. In the so-called the Aboriginal Australian ideas, there was something called the dreaming or dream time, and these are basically the mythological apparatus of Aboriginal peoples, and it's all sorts of great stories about snakes creating the universe and about floods and about fires and about all sorts of things. But
well, let's just stop and think about that for a minute, shall we? Snakes creating the universe. Well, there is a particular serpent that claimed to do something similar that I can think of. Floods. There was one of those. Fires. There's a picture of a woman looking at a rainbow, which we know what the significance of a rainbow is. it sounds to me like the Aboriginals have an opinion or their version of events from their perspective about the things that occurred during the flood, the global flood that destroyed everything and all the fallen angels that were upon this earth at that time. And yes, those people were here, and yes, they saw it. And that means that they have an opinion on it. If you'll find out, the Hopi Indian also have a flood story because they witnessed it too, and they've got an idea of what happened that day or that week. And so does everybody else in the world. That's how you know it happened, because all the cultures in the world don't have the same story, even though they don't know about the existence of the other cultures in the world if it didn't occur. Dreamtime and Norse mythology carry a lot of similarities, says Caucasian. I would agree with that. What does the rainbow mean? The rainbow is a promise from God. After the flood waters receded and Noah and his family came off of the ark, God presented them with a rainbow, which is basically what happens when water in the air meets the sunlight and it causes a prism. And he said, by this bow in the sky, I promise to never destroy the earth by water again. And thus he made a promise to Noah and his family. And that's the significance of that rainbow. I will give you a better idea that before the flood, rainbows did not occur because there was no great moisture in the air as there is now. Where did the flood waters go, you ask? They're still here. That's what the oceans are. Before the flood, there were no oceans. Seas, but no oceans. So all that water drained off into the low places, and that's where it remains to this day. And when moisture reaches the atmosphere and sunlight shines through it, you get a little prism that looks like a rainbow. And that is a promise from God that he will never destroy the whole earth again with water. He'll destroy it by fire, but not by water.
I never hear these people saying that the dreaming is true because it happened.
Nope.
I mean,
dream did not happen. A dream is a dream, not a happening.
that or because it happened sometime in the past. That is,
No, sir. The Egyptians are from Egypt. The Jewish people are of the tribe of Judah, which comes from the area of Jerusalem, that area where the Jordan River is, which is not in Egypt. The Egyptians were of a different group of people. And the Egyptians that are there now are not the same as the Egyptians that were there then. Different peoples. I couldn't tell you where the people came from today. They're from all over and lots of breeding, I would imagine. But the people that were there back then were a specific group of people. And they were of one of the tribes, but not the tribe of Judah. You mean the people that were enslaved in Egypt, the Hebrews? Yes, those people are of that group. The ones that escaped out of Egypt and went on to form Israel, those are the people we're talking about. But they were not Egyptian, they were Hebrews. Hebrew is from, if you go back into the genealogies and go back and find a name, Eber, his children were Hebrews. Eber, from Eber, Hebrew. And they're also, the word Hebrew means those who crossed over the river. What river? The River Jordan. So you can go back and find where they crossed over the River Jordan in their journey to the Promised Land, and those people are called Hebrews. And yes, they are of the group of people we're talking about.
that's a very stupid thing to say. The dreaming isn't true because it happened in the past. The dreaming is true because it's true, and it's what we all experience in our own dreams and in our own visions.
I've never had that dream. What are you talking about?
And the idea,
Like Esau. Esau was Jacob's brother. That was a little bit before the things that occurred in Egypt. Esau was Jacob's brother, Abraham's son. Abraham was the first patriarch of that group of people.
The idea of this, trying to be verified by history is ridiculous. When Westerners get their hands on this stuff, they're like, oh, this must be historical memory of some ancient flood 15,000 years ago.
Nope.
Good point.
Well, it might be or it might not be, but that's not the point of the dreaming. And so this weird Western habit to try to say, I'm going to verify my religion by checking up on the history has always found, I've always found that a very weird connection. And what,
Dude, are you one of those people that think 2 and 2 don't necessarily have to equal 4? Do you hear yourself? Did you just say, I'm going to verify my religion by looking at history, and you find that to be weird? What? That's a strange way to think, my friend. I don't know what you're driving at here, but if it is historically accurate, you can base your religion on it because it happened. God hated Esau. Yes. Do you know why he hated Esau? Alpine says, we've been covering your questions recently on Sundays and Mondays. Do you know why God hated Esau? Have you ever heard the story of the prodigal son, where a son couldn't wait to get out on his own and show the world what a man he was? So he left his family. He left them in need, by the way, and went out into the world alone. He forsook, turned his back on his family, went out in the world alone, and in the process spent all of his inheritance and gambled away all of his money and found himself living in a pigsty eating slop. Now, this is a man who comes from a family, and in those days, a family that was established was well off. They had riches, they had servants, they had cattle, they had a property. And this is where he comes from, but he's out in the world alone and scared and by himself and living in a pigsty eating slop. And he says, I would trade my birthright for a bowl of good soup. His birthright was God. His birthright was that of Abraham, a covenant with God, a promise made between God and Abraham to save all of the people in that family. And he traded it for a bowl of soup. Now, eventually he comes home, and his father welcomes him with open arms and throws a party in his honor and all of that good stuff. And his other son, who's been there the whole time working in the fields and taking care of his dad, says, why are you throwing him a party? You never threw me a party, and I'm the son that never left. And he said, son, you're home. I have you. You've been here this whole time, and I'm grateful. This is my son also, and he's been lost. And now we've found him. So, yeah, I'm throwing a party. It's a cause to celebrate. Unfortunately, though, Esau sold his birthright for nothing. And God did not appreciate that at all. And that's why God hated Esau. It wasn't because of Esau being Esau. It was because of his decision-making.
what I'm trying to do in this book is sort of defamiliarize that, because whether or not you're on the far right or the far left, or you're a fundamentalist or you're a mythicist, you tend to work with that same presupposition. Either you want to prove that your religion is true because it happened in the past, or you want to prove that your religion or that somebody else's religion is not true because it didn't happen in the past.
Interesting.
But both sides have the same philosophical presupposition that religious truth can be verified by things that happened in the past.
They can.
And I just noticed that this doesn't make any sense at all. That there's
No, your line of thinking doesn't make any sense at all. What are you saying exactly? If it happened in the past, it didn't happen? If it happened, can you not trust it? What are you saying exactly? It sounds to me like you're arguing for argumentative sake. Doesn't sound like you have a point at all. Make it already if you do. And D's, that's not exactly accurate. He did not drive Jacob away. Jacob's mother tricked Jacob into taking Esau's birthright because Esau didn't care about it very much. And Jacob was terrified that Esau would kill him over it. So Jacob stayed away from Esau for a long time. Eventually, they joined forces again, and Esau forgave him and threw his arms around his brother. There was no animosity there. It was just fear of animosity. So that's a little bit off that you're thinking there, but you're on the right track.
We don't even know what these people don't seem to have a clear grasp of what history is. History is and has always been a guessing game.
Nope, that is not true. We have documentation about history. There is some history that is altered in the documents because it's written by victors of wars, but we also have other histories that are accurate. And also, there are histories we know nothing about, so it's not a guessing game.
A game of construction. There's nothing divine about history.
Correct.
I mean, God himself doesn't do history. It's humans who do history.
The word history, his story, capital H, his story. God absolutely does history. He left a Bible full of history for you to study. What are you talking about? Litwa wrote books that the Gospels were forgeries. Well, unfortunately, there are a group of scientists who think that, but they don't put a lot of validity into their statements. Unfortunately, we can't really tell who wrote the Gospels in many cases because they're old, really, really old, and some of them we don't even know when they were written. But some of the Gospels say who wrote them. Why would we deny that? Why would we doubt that? And unfortunately, ignorance is not a sin. So, all we have to go on are the documents. And in my philosophy, you have to trust something. I would rather err on the side of caution and trust the documents. They are first-hand accounts in many cases, and in other cases, they're eyewitness accounts. But the Gospels tell you who wrote them. Anytime in the first few books that you see the phrase, these are the generations of, or this is the story of, or these are the words of, that's who wrote the book. And in other cases, it outright tells you, such as the books that Paul wrote. They're very clear as to who wrote those books. I'm not suggesting that there's no room for error. Of course there is. They could be forgeries. I don't believe they are because they check out. And there are some books that were deemed to be forgeries and they were taken out of the Bible at the Council of Nicaea, such as the Gospel of Thomas, which is very clear that it did not come from the translation that came down from Antioch, which is that's the translation the King James Version is based on, and that has the most clear lineage back to the original texts of any translations we have, which is why the King James is the most accurate depiction of the Bible, because it comes from the Antioch scriptures. There are other Gospels that come from other translations, and they're not nearly as clean or nearly as well received or nearly as studied along the way. Like, we know exactly where those scriptures came from. So you can trust the pedigree, you can trust the chain of custody of those Gospels. But say the Gutenberg Bible came from a different set, or the Alexandrian set of Gospels, and we cannot verify where they came from, you see. So they're not what I would call trash documents. They're not good. And they also contradict the Antioch papers. Hope that helps. But this guy, in my opinion, he's talking nonsense.
Right.
And all that we have are texts that people interpret and that people disagree on. And one of the greatest examples of this is the Gospels. The Gospels are read as history today, but the real question is, how did the Gospel writers themselves imagine what they were doing? And so that was the
Gospel writers themselves were keeping record of the events that were occurring before their eyes. That's how they imagined what they were doing. They weren't writing novels. They weren't that kind of a writer. They were scribes. And a scribe and a recorder in the Bible are basically the same thing. They take down what's being done and what's being said. They write it down, they put it in a narrative form, and then they put it into a scroll. And from there, that scroll will either be studied or put into a church or dismissed, depending on the validity of the document. So what did the gospel writers think they were doing? They thought they were reporting the news. That's why they're called gospel, which means good news.
That was the point. That was the reason why I got into how the Gospels became history.
This is really just a fascinating point to point out for people who might be interested in checking this out. I highly recommend, once again, that you get the book. It's well worth taking the time to see this. What you're explaining is exactly the conversation, and I'm not trying to be rude at all, okay, at all. I had this conversation one night with Del Martin. Okay, I had a conversation with Del Martin on the phone. He said, give me a call. We emailed, right? He didn't know me from Adam, gave him a phone call, and I said, Del, we were talking about Paul for a second. I just said, I'm trying to figure out what he meant. Like, what the heck? What was he going through? I want to know the who, what, when, where, why, that kind of stuff. Like, that's the stuff I'm interested in. I'm not worried about what a guy in 1700 stop Paul meant, or in the 1500s, what Martin Luther thinks he meant when he said justification by faith alone. Like the way he interpreted Paul. I want to know what Paul probably meant. Now, we may never.
If you want to know what Paul meant, maybe you should start by reading the books of Paul. Might be a place you could start.
Never know exactly what Paul meant. We have so many people on different ends. You got one guy say he's within Judaism, one guy saying no, he's saying the opposite of what you think he's saying. And it's like, whoa. Well, in the Gospels, with what you're doing, it seems that you're trying to do something like what I'm interested in, but at the same time, you're explaining like how maybe the authors originally didn't mean what. I guess it's like when you put something through the fire, what's going to remain is kind of what happens. And the early church fathers, correct me if I'm wrong here, are being kind of put through the fire.
You're wrong here.
By other people who are starting to point fingers and compete with them on these ideas. And so they're having to kind of take a strong stance with their text, if I'm not mistaken.
You are mistaken, because the early church fathers did not write the texts. They're just teaching what the texts say. They have no stake in whether they're correct or not. So it's not their ideas that are being challenged. It's the original writer's ideas that are being challenged. And they're being challenged by people like you who don't believe what they're seeing with their own eyes. You said it. You almost said it yourself. Maybe the gospel writers didn't mean what they wrote down. You stopped yourself from saying that, but that's what you were going to say, right? Well, why would they write down something they didn't mean? In those days, it was not a tradition to write fantasy or fiction. They were writing down what they saw. They absolutely meant it. By the way, all 12 disciples went to their deaths refusing to recant the events that they wrote down. They all faced their death by martyrdom, by being stoned or beheaded, or even in some cases crucified, because they refused to recant. All they had to do was say, yeah, we were lying. And they would not, because they knew what they saw happened and it would change the world, and they all knew it. They also all knew that as soon as they died, they'd be in heaven with the Father. They were not afraid of death. Whatever they witnessed, they all believed it to their life's end. So yeah, they believed what they wrote down. Yes, this interview does sound like gibberish.
Is this where
Yeah.
it becomes historical, if I might ask?
Well, the argument I make,
It becomes historical because it happened in history. You moron. You living embodiment of a wet fart. It happened back then. That's why it's historical. No other reason.
in the book is that the gospel writers themselves imagine themselves as doing what ancients called historia. And that's not exactly the same.
That would be writing down history, historia. Writing down what occurred for posterity's sake. Yes, that's exactly what they thought they were doing, because that's what they were doing.
As modern historiography. So there's two things I distinguish. There's the ancient historia, things that, like Herodotus, if your viewers are familiar with him.
Do you doubt
things
Herodotus?
that Herodotus did.
Do you doubt Josephus? Do you doubt any of the other historians who wrote many things that occurred in the past? Why would you doubt Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, who were of the same ilk?
Is ancient historia. That is, it's not kind of modern history. It's not like archival based. It's just some guy going out and saying, I heard this story and I'm going to tell you about it. And he's going on tour to various places and he's like, I'm going to tell you another story. I don't really believe it, but I'm going to tell you it anyway. And
you just presupposed what a person you've never met is actually thinking when they do the thing that they actually did. That is what we call an embellishment. There is no truth in what you're saying. You have an opinion based on what you think someone else thought while they were alive hundreds of years ago, and you are incorrect in your thinking. There is no reason to go further. This guy is a fool. You should not read anything he writes, period.
sort of, that's ancient historia. It's not the same rigorous stuff as modern historiography. And the interesting thing about ancient historia is that it can include things that the Greeks called mythoi, or for us, myth. I don't use myth in the book.
Greeks did not call their history myth. We call their history myth. We are also the only country that calls their history myth. They call it history because it happened.
Because it's such a politicized term, I prefer to use mythoi, which is, again, just the Greek there. But mythoi basically are fantastical tales and things that you wouldn't necessarily believe.
Why not?
But
if you believe that fallen angels were on this earth at that time, mating with human beings, then you would believe that their offspring could do things that you cannot do. There's no reason to disbelieve that. That's what the ancient history says in every culture. They may use different words for it, but it's the same thing. What the Greeks might call a titan, we would call a renowned man of old, or a fallen angel, or a Nephilim, or a Raphaim, depending on where they came from. Those that came down at Mount Hermon in the ancient times, and it was recorded in history for posterity's sake that this occurred. They did come down. They did mate with people. They did have offspring, and those offspring did some pretty nasty things. That's what the ancient Greeks are reporting, or the Norse mythology is reporting, or the ancient Hopi Indians are reporting about the ant people or the sky people, or the Egyptians, or the South Americans, or the Chinese, and their language, their very language talks about it. What are you saying? That none of that's true, that you know the truth and nobody else does? That's what you're saying. You got the history right. Everyone else has it wrong. Here's a thought. Try again.
there was a a movement when the Gospels were being written, a kind of literature that was being written that tried to put mythoi into the form of history. And the Greek there is...
That form of writing was called historical documents. That's why they were doing that. Because what you are calling mythoi was ancient history. It did occur. They did write about it then. They wrote about it later too. But there are original documents that talk about that time in specific and the things that occurred then. It's not myth, it's reality. What's myth is our interpretation of reality, our ideas about what occurred in those days. That's myth. But the myth has a kernel of truth.
And historias schemati. And we see ancient Greek authors doing this. One key example is Diodorus of Sicily. So he's a 1st century BCE writer, and he writes a huge...
You know what BCE is? That is historians' way of getting rid of the past. We have AD and BC, after death and before Christ. That's the point in which we measure our time, somewhere around the birth of Christ. Anything prior to that is BC. Anything beyond that is Anno Domini, or after death. BCE is a way of shifting the timeline ever so slightly so that none of the dates match up with the things they find in archaeology. That way they can say with absolute certainty, as reference to BCE, that the dates don't match. That can't be the place you think it is. Here's the problem with that. It is the place you think it is, because it's right where the Bible said it was. And if you would study history instead of this new shit they came up with in the 1800s, you would see that.
Huge multi-volume work called The Library of History. And if you look up the first 4 books of that Library of History, which survive and are pretty easily accessible online, you'll see that he starts his history with what even the ancients thought of as the mythical period. That is the time of the Trojan, the stuff that happened before the Trojan War.
The Trojan War, meaning the Trojan horse, talking about Helen of Troy, which they found and verified was a real event. So you're wrong.
So things like, Egyptian gods, the birth of Egyptian gods, the birth of Greek gods, the adventures of Heracles, and so on and so forth, or Hercules if you prefer. Book 4 is actually mostly about Heracles. And what Diodorus says there is, he says, I'm going to tell you about Heracles because he's a great hero. Everybody believes him. Speaking of the ancients here, everybody believes him. But what I'm going to do is, I notice that the stories about Heracles, they're all myths or mythoi, but I'm going to put them in the form of history. So I'm going to tell you the story as if it were a connected series of events.
So are you saying that before they wrote about it, it was myth, and then they wrote about it as history? Or was it history that they wrote about, and then you decided it was myth prior to that? Because I don't recall any first writings of these books that then became historical later, which is what you're describing. I think you're wrong. I think you have an skewed view of history. I think that you read some things that you find hard to believe so that you put them in the myth column. They didn't put it in the myth column. They wrote about it like it happened because it happened. Those people existed. Hercules was a real person. So was Samson. So was Kronos. So was Zeus. These are people that existed, that had great power. They lived in ancient times, way before what we would call modern civilization, in the times of the Titans or the Great Ones. They did exist. They were people. They were probably viewed as kings or high-powered people. We put the word God on them. They were not necessarily known as God. We use that word. Our God says he's the only God, and he created all things. No other God claims to have created all things. All other gods come from within creation. Does that tell you anything? Something's not right there. There can't be multiple creators of everything. There's only one, and that's God Almighty. These other, what we call gods, are just people that had great power.
That's how I'm going to do it. And so this form of writing ancient history, I call mythic historiography. And that is the model that I use for understanding what the gospel writers are doing. What the gospel writers have at their disposal, I think, is a series of rather fantastical tales, what others would call mythoi, and they put them into the form of history and historia schemati. They give it a narrative, they organize it, and they also use certain tropes to give it the form of history. And some of those tropes include naming rulers of the day, or naming famous places, or bringing in so-called talking about eyewitnesses, or using very vivid language, talking
Vivid language, like, this is the guy who was the king. This is an eyewitness who can back up what I'm saying. How are you not seeing this as reality? You know what naming a king is? It's the modern day equivalent of holding up a newspaper with today's date on it, saying, this is happening now. Why would you assume that's a trope when that's literally the only way to establish what timeline something was written in? Because they did it? Because they knew about it? Or because you just are naturally mistrusting? That's as far as we're going to go into this video tonight. We will pick the rest of this up next Wednesday, and we'll finish it out or get closer to the end anyway. I hope you guys enjoyed the view tonight. I hope you learned something exciting. I hope that it caused you to think a little bit with that gray matter between your ears. And won't you please do me a favor? Hit that subscribe button. Press the bell icon so you'll get notifications of when I'm going to be here. Smash the like button for me, please. It only takes a second. It's free, and it helps us with the numbers. Share this video with somebody you love. Bring them into the family. Make them part of the fold. Be part of their solutions, not part of their problems. And leave a comment down below. Let me know what you're thinking about. Question me, curse me, bless me, challenge me, confront me, conform with me, drink my Kool-Aid. Drink your own Kool-Aid. As long as you're thinking clearly, that's what I want. Critical thought coming from that brain of yours. And hey, if you dig what I'm doing and you see the value in what I'm trying to create, and you'd like to be part of that, be part of something special, if you'd like to feel obligated to the channel, or if you feel led to send your offerings or tithes or love offerings, or if you just want to buy me a cup of coffee and say, hey, good job tonight, Jake, won't you take a moment, go to paypal.me/JakeJohnsonBand. Every little bit helps. It's a win-win. It's a blessing for me. It's a blessing for you too, because God notices these things. With that, I will finish this video by taking your questions and comments. Roseanne Clark, you're out of here. Go away, fly. Shoo, fly. We'll have none of your computer language around here. Okay, that was real and good. Well, thank you, Alpine. I appreciate it. I was hoping it wouldn't be too boring. That's a little out of my comfort zone, commenting on someone else's podcast. I'd rather talk to the guy about his opinions rather than talking about his book through someone else. But he did bring up a few things that he thought, and he led me close enough to believe that he's full of malarkey, and I don't want anything to do with anything he's teaching. So hopefully that'll help you too. Hopefully I've illuminated the error in his way of thought, and hopefully it'll avoid some people from going down that rabbit hole. It's kind of terrifying that those kind of people are teaching people in this world. which is why I exist, to stop that. I'm a one-man superhero. I'm taking on the fight. Or just running my mouth in front of a camera. Either way, I'm getting her done. Des, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you'll be back. Dees or Des or whatever your name is. I hope you come back for more. I hope you enjoyed it tonight, and I hope you subscribed. Let me see if I can get rid of this person. I think my wrench is taking the night off. Come on. So slow. Bloop. I never heard the word mythoid. I haven't either. I think he's just trying to sound smart. He failed. Because his argument is, just because it happened in the past don't mean you can trust that it happened in the past. I would understand if he said just because somebody wrote that something happened in the past doesn't mean you can trust what they said about it. He didn't say that. He said it happened in the past, therefore you should not base your religion on it. Great job. We got a lot out of it, says Diego. Thank you, sir. I hope you did. I hope that it was informative and wise and all the good stuff. And I do kind of enjoy taking down these people. I think since many of the stories are miraculous, he only trusts the natural world, not the supernatural. Well, I trust the English language, and the word supernatural means more natural, means above natural, like a superscript is above the line. More natural means more natural than we are natural. We're natural. God is supernatural. Therefore, the things he does is actually more natural than the things we do. He does most of the talking, not the guy he's being interviewed by. Yes, that's the saving grace. Like I said, we need to try to avoid that from now on, but this video will be all right. We'll make it through this one. If I don't get struck by it, we'll see. He may not like me using his work. We'll see, though. So they won't lead God's children astray. I don't think he's going to lead God's children astray. Anybody that would listen to that guy don't have a lot of common sense. I think if you're one of God's children, you got enough smarts to be able to call the bullshit he's spewing. I would hope anyway. I mean, literally the first thing he said got me on my haunches, got me defensive. The first thing he said sounded like garbage. And it didn't get better. So, hopefully, God's children are smarter than that. I'm not claiming to have all the answers. I have chosen to, and I did a podcast that illustrated this point. I've chosen to trust the documents of the Bible because I can verify where they came from. And it's the oldest text I can find. Therefore, it's the document I choose to trust. From that point forward, I have to assume that what it says is the truth and move in that direction. That being said, if one thing in the Bible is not true, if one lie is exposed and I can see it for the bullshit that it might be, then all of it is out the window. I will stop immediately. I can't teach a book where even one thing is wrong. Now, that's not to say that a person being wrong. I'm saying that if there is a fact in the Bible that turns out to not be true, and it's calling it a fact in the Bible, then all the Bible is out the window and I stop now. I will recant my faith. I will stop teaching. I'll go on the offensive. I'll go to work for the other side. It's not going to happen, though, because I've already been through it. For 30 years, I have been looking for a mistake in the Bible, and I have not found one. And I've looked hard in more than one language. If it's there, it's the most hidden mistake in history. And to hear people like this who haven't even read the Bible in its entirety claim it has errors in it, I'm sorry, you're going to have to do better than that. If you haven't read the Bible from cover to cover, you have no business telling me that it's not true, because you don't know what's in it. That's like a person who doesn't have children trying to tell somebody who's a parent how they should act. You have no idea what you're talking about. You have no idea the stakes involved. You have no idea what has to occur to raise a child. So don't tell me how to raise a child if you don't have one. And don't tell me how to read the Bible if you haven't read it. And I know this guy hasn't read it all the way through. He might have read some selected parts, but if he's read it all the way through, he didn't understand what he was reading. 420 says, yep, truth. Where did Deez go? Did he leave us? Maybe he'll be back. I believe this is the first podcast that April and Kevin both were not at. I'm going to have to get on to them about that. Yeah, 420, we hope you get through whatever you're going through. You never told us what got you in the hospital. But we are all thinking about you, and you got us pulling for you, if that helps. And I'm sorry you're in that situation. And if you need anything, let somebody know. It's snowing. Wow. Take a picture of that. I was hoping it was going to snow here this winter, but it's looking way too warm for that. I got my air conditioner on right now. I had leukemia in 2010. Is that a thing you can get over? Leukemia? Are you saying you beat it and now it's rearing its ugly head again? Well, I'm sorry about that, buddy. Keep fighting it. Don't let it get you down. He said complications with transplant. Oh, I must have missed that. I'm sorry. My immune system gets wild, so we need to calm it. And I had a bone marrow transplant. Okay. I understand. Well, we're praying for you, buddy. I know it sucks. From what I understand, that bone marrow transplant's quite painful, so you have our sympathies too. It's not back. You're just having complications. I got you. Well, that's good. Maybe the bone marrow transplant worked and your body's just having trouble adjusting to it. There is strength in prayer, and you have prayer, so grit your teeth and take it, but know that you got a team backing you up. Maybe that'll give you the strength to get through it. And nothing is impossible with our Father, so if He wants you to get through it, nothing can stop you. Especially in a time of COVID. I imagine that's had you worried. If your immune system is diving, I can imagine how that would keep you up at night. Well, I've got to run. I got to call my buddy back and find out what happened with him. He don't just call unless there's a problem, so I got to find out what's up. I'm not going outside for a picture, LOL, maybe in the morning. Well, whenever. Take a picture out the window. Share that snow with us. We love it. Stay warm, though. Don't get too cold. You got plenty of wood for the fire, so to speak? And you are most welcome, 420. It's our pleasure. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me tonight and enjoying the content. I hope that it did you some good, and I hope you had a good time while we did it. I will see you guys on Sunday at 8 p.m. for some Bible study. Have a great night. I enjoyed your company, and I can't wait till next time. Take a moment and be kind to someone and watch it change your life. Watch it change the very nature of who you are as a human being. Just the act of kindness, just the act of attrition will change everything. Trust me on that. Love and peace. God bless. And take care and have a great night. Thanks for watching.